Checking in with labor tonight.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
You know, so often we check in with investors and politicians and managers and, the money people that make decisions to make things and build things and recreate things and change a city or build a Fane Tower if it's possible or any of those things, right? We don't often talk to labor, and that's, I think, a deficiency in terms of the public communication. We just kind of assume, well, yeah, they're there to get the work done, but they have a seat at the table. So while we may not be paying attention exactly to what their impact is, believe me, nothing gets done, nothing gets negotiated, nothing gets computed, nothing gets assessed, nothing happens without labor leadership, not only in the state but in the country. So tonight we'll talk to one of the important people in that category. Let me just show you a headline here. I mean, I'm guessing that you saw at least or certainly followed the State of the Union address. Other than the boos, the hisses, and the dynamics that went on back and forth between Republicans and Democrats, infrastructure played a very, very significant role. So let's start with that conversation. Michael Sabitoni is here. He is the president of the Rhode Island Building Trades and always accessible. He and I have been doing this. Let's do a show because there's so much on the table. Belated Happy New Year. Thanks for coming.
Happy New Year to you. Welcome.
Did you have a take on the president's discussion of infrastructure? I was especially moved by the steelworker who goes 10 feet high. I actually saw her in an interview with her last night on television as well. Being there as somebody who's a veteran public project employee, an African-American woman, showed some diversity. Yep. But I've traveled that bridge in Cincinnati and Kentucky, and the $2 billion worth of commerce goes out over it every single day is hardly an overstatement. It's an impressive structure that needed so much rehab, and so does everything else, doesn't it?
So I was pleased with the president's address, as you mentioned in your introduction. Labor, and more specifically, the building trades play a massive role in the economy. The movement of goods, investments in our infrastructure, which, as you've known, we've had discussions over the years, has been long neglected for a long, long time. Major investments in infrastructure, not just putting little Band-Aids on things, but a robust infrastructure program that the Biden administration got passed on a bipartisan vote, I might add as well. And you're starting to see, what's the ramifications of passing that bill in places such as that, in Rhode Island, across the country. And I think going forward the next 2 years, it's going to be awfully hard for Republicans to say, because a bridge isn't blue or red, a road isn't blue or red, infrastructure historically used to be a bipartisan issue where we'd have our differences, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. But everybody agreed that you need a modern infrastructure. Business, commerce needs a modern infrastructure. People need water. You need clean water. You need sewers. You need, public transit. You need now technology, fiber optic. I mean, for us to keep and maintain, I think he mentioned in his address that we've slipped to 13th in the world in our infrastructure quality. Well, that's not good enough. We used to be number one. So that $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill, you're going to start to see and continue to see major investments. And the byproduct of that, as you know, for what I do for a living, is we get to put an awful lot of young men and women in our existing workforce as well, but offer opportunities for people to build these things and jobs that pay good, family-sustaining wages and benefits that can't be outsourced.
This notion of politics and labor, first of all, labor is not, it's not monolithic. I mean, there's so many aspects to labor. There's public employee unions, there's private employee unions. For the most part, you're running the show for private unions.
But I do have about 6,000 public employees I represent as well. I'm under the Rhode Island Labor's District Council.
Meaning they do what kind of work?
So I have about 1,500 state workers that work in RIPTA and work in the DOT, and 911, public safety. Then I've got municipal workers, about 3,000, City of Providence, City of Cranston,
Okay, so
housing
you do have,
authorities.
so you've got both sides of the aisle.
So I actually understand it because I've got probably half and half. Half of my membership, I come from the private sector,
Right.
construction
But
industry.
they're different animals.
They are different, but they all have a role to play in a robust economy, right? Public service, you need to have a good functional public service to get anything done. And if we don't, then projects can't come to fruition because if there's breakdowns in agencies and the progression that needs to happen to plan and develop things, that's an issue. I mean, the rubble, we've done great things. Still some work to do is to modernize how we can move projects through the planning process to get them, to the phase where we can build them. So all of labor has a seat and a role to play in a vibrant economy, both public and private.
You're hinting at efficiencies. Seems to me that the best efficiencies are found from the bottom up, not the top down. When people are doing the work, they understand how to do it more efficiently. Is there any kind of projection or concern that as technology on so many fronts improves, there'll be lesser need for the jobs that exist today?
I wouldn't say
Have we seen a
lesser.
progression in that direction?
There's always going to be improvements in technology that might minimize opportunities in one area, but then might add additional opportunities in others, right? So whatever your classification is, public or private, we always have to stay up with the times and make sure that we're up to speed on what's happening in technology in the workforce, which is, and it's going to continue to happen. But as people then, the training will start to be upgraded as well, so that we can make sure that we have the skill set necessary, whatever the classification, to meet the need. So technology is what it is. But in some areas we lose, in other areas we gain.
The categories inside the building trades for careers are what? The top 5, 6, 7, 8. What are they? Just list them
You
for
have
me.
laborers that I represent. You have carpenters. You would have electricians, plumbers, pipe fitters, iron workers, bricklayers, cement finishers, roofers, I mean, we have 16 trades that we represent. So that all goes into building, whatever you're, either a structure or a bridge or a road.
On a consumer level, I think one of the things that people find more and more frustrating is that you can't get a good plumber these days.
Right.
I mean,
it's true.
I'm
the president of the building trades, and I have problems sometimes getting
right.
a good
I
plumber.
mean, just the electrician, you wait for weeks because they're so stacked up with work. Have we paid enough attention with all this collegiate type of discussion and academic achievement that is, very centered toward being able to perform and more kids in college and all that kind of thing? Have we really made a mistake in de-emphasizing, blue collar, and by the way, blue collar sophisticated expertise? I mean, I can't fix a switch. And I had the plumber in last week. That's the other thing. We're talking about all my mishaps. I've had a week of mishaps. So the pump blew for the catch basin, and we got water in the basement when it's 8 degrees below zero. I'm like, oh no, but it was just but he comes in. I'm looking at it like this. Right? He's looking at it going, yeah, I'll be back in 2 days with it. We have less and less.
The answer to your question is yes, and again, I think you've heard that echoed and did hear it in the president's speech, as well as some of the speeches that you heard coming from our representatives after that. We need to, and we are putting a greater focus again on the trades, non-4-year traditional learning, apprenticeship, learn a craft, learn a trade, and then you can have a career a good paying career for the rest of your life. The last 20 or 30 years or so, it was. I think our educators and our guidance counselors were geared towards, every kid's got to go to college, right? And I was fortunate enough. I went to college, but my family was in the construction business and industry. And while I was going to college, I was working construction. So I still, got the best of both worlds. But there's never been a better time to enter the construction industry, and the need for, journeyman plumbers, journeyman electricians, iron workers, laborers, carpet, all of the crafts that I have mentioned. The average age of a construction worker in the United States, average age, is 50 years old.
What are we going to do?
We're gonna spend $1.2 trillion, and we're gonna gear up our apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship programs, which we've already done. We've got the training infrastructure in place. We've got the ability now to recruit, and we've got what we really always needed was the need. So the need is there now with us making our investments in the infrastructure that we've neglected for such a long time. So now that's why it's such a good time.
Do you have to market, we'll finish this conversation on this question, do you have to market the viability and the respectability of choosing a trade versus a four-year collegiate institution, which a lot of people are wondering about the value for these days, right? It seems to me it's one thing to put the money in the training, and you got to sell the idea that if Johnny or Janie wants to decide that they want to work with their hands,
right,
that is a valuable and honorable thing to do.
Right. Some people like that, right? So it's not for everybody, but people that get exposed to it, we're in the high schools now, we're in the career and technical schools.
Saying it's okay.
We have our curriculum embedded in those schools now, that we have exploratory programs now in 5 CTEs right now in Rhode Island, soon to expand. We want to have one in every community to create a pipeline for people to come into a pre-apprenticeship.
CTE.
Career and technical education.
Right.
To come through that pipeline and then come into a registered building trade apprenticeship program, then to become a journey person. And we pay the best benefits. You make a great wage. There are I would say downsides, but things that are unique to the industry that come with any occupation. Some of it's seasonal to an extent. There's the elements, so you have to work out in the elements. Have to work with your hands. Some have height, some have depth. There's all different things. But if you get by all those things, and those things aren't a barrier to you, if you're not going to go to college, you need to learn a trade, and then you can have a good living. Yeah,
I guess my point is, you don't necessarily have to go to college if you don't feel it in your gut, and you should be exploring these other options.
And that was something again that President Biden echoed, that jobs that you don't need a college education to get, and we're one of them.
All right, well, let's check up on some of the projects that we're working on right now in the state. Stay with us. Well, there's a political football and a half right there, the Superman building. The governor, who you endorsed.
Yes, I did.
Has made it a priority to get this thing figured out, and all I got to do is say Superman building on the radio show, and the phone lines rip with people who say take it down, don't spend the money, blah blah blah. I think it is too big to fail. I think it is too much of a tooth in the landscape, in the mouth of the city of Providence, and to be a gaping hole without it. The owner's issues and his requirements and the formula itself can be debated all day long. But you've been at the table on this one
since day one.
In a big way. It seems like the formula is manageable.
It is.
And the state has not only an investment to make along with the city, but if it does well, the state does well.
And the city will do well, and as goes the city of Providence, goes the state of Rhode Island.
How many jobs are involved in the rehab of that building?
There would be a tremendous amount, north of, I'd say 600-700 tradespeople, maybe even more than that. This is a
for what length of period of time on the rehab?
Well, it all depends. I mean, the demolition, which I would perform under the laborers, will be substantial, because there's a lot of hand demolition that has to happen on the interior of that building.
The building won't be demolished, just the inside.
No, just the inside. The reconfiguring of the floors, the core drilling, the bringing of the the new mechanisms into the building. So there is a tremendous amount of work to be done in that building. And my office is in Providence on South Main Street, and I go over the Point Street Bridge every night on my way home. And it actually just makes me feel good just to glance over now and look at the skyline of the city of Providence, where we used to be missing a tooth, where now you start to see that building coming alive again, where it's lit back up.
Right.
And I was in all the talks with the proposed developers about, trying to get an anchor tenant there, trying to get, someone to come in, one big tenant to take the whole building. Then even prior to COVID, that was so difficult to get someone of that size to come in and take that building and refurbish it and then be the anchor tenant. All right, it's because people are moving away from even before COVID, the tall type structures, at least around here, are moving more towards campus settings, like Citizens Bank, for instance, in Johnston, where they moved to a campus setting. So every single thing has been explored by the state of Rhode Island since Bank of America left that building. And this was the last chance to save that. And it's iconic. I mean, other than the Newport Bridge, I would say that building is the most recognizable symbol in the state of Rhode Island.
Well, you're preaching to the choir.
Right.
Fane Tower, you want that.
Yes.
It baffles me, though. The designs. Is there ever a project, Mike, that you just kind of say,
No.
It's off-putting? I mean that thing. I don't buy it.
I was at the last hearing, and beauty is in the eye of the beholder was my testimony. And I'll just tell you you know me, I don't pull no punches.
Right.
You ask me a question, I'll give you an answer. The new design, I think, is a good-looking building. The old design, I was not.
Is that the old or the new we're looking at right there? Is that the old or the new design?
The new one is more sleek because they incorporated the balconies now into the actual.
But even so,
footage.
the height that's proposed, sticking off of what is the cityscape, I don't know.
But you know what happens when you have tall buildings over here, and then you build a tall building over here in other
You get another
cities?
tall building?
Other tall buildings fill in the
In the
void.
middle.
And
Do you project that there's space there? I mean, you're not in the planning department here,
I do.
but
I mean, there's always opportunities. Depending on. I mean, I don't know how many additional high rises would end up in the city of Providence. But when you look at the size of the project, when you look at the implications it'll have on the finances, a couple $100 million of tax revenue to a desperately needed city that needs revenue. The bringing vibrancy back to downtown. So we just talked about Superman. Now you're going to have a building here with 800 residents. Now you have another building, close proximity, a couple blocks away, with 1,000 residents. These are people residents that don't go home at 5 o'clock. That'll stay in the city.
Oh, yeah.
That'll have coffee. That'll get something to drink.
yeah,
They'll get
I'm
their
all
dry
about
cleaning.
I'm all about the economic development. I'm just talking about that particular design. It just kind of feels like it's a weird version of round peg square hole.
So
but, I don't know.
The other thing that I did when I was at the hearing last week was took a picture of the Back Bay in Boston, which has been developed over the last 10 years or so in a big way in the city of Boston, and then said this building looks very similar to a couple of the anchor structures in the development in the Back Bay, and this is what would happen here in Providence.
Soccer stadium. I actually drove by the other day. I haven't seen any more shovel and ground evidence, but it's all prepped. What's your take on schedule?
We poured concrete yesterday. Mother Nature
really?
has been very nice to us. We are ahead of schedule on the concrete because of the mild winter that we're having, and I anticipate in the very near future we'll start the steel erection. So you'll start to see significant activity on that site. The project is moving along. I meet regularly with the developer. This is going to be a great investment for the city of Pawtucket. We are absolutely still committed, and I think in light with what's happening with some other investments and our emphasis on housing, I know we had to move around some pieces on the chessboard to get phase 1 off the ground, but we're already having conversations on how and when we're going to start phase 2, which, as you know, is the pedestrian bridge over the river, and then residential village scenario.
There's going to have to be some interesting finance with or without the General Assembly on that. What's your instinct?
There'll be some housing. There'll be some workforce housing in there. There'll be some investment, public investment, but there'll be a huge private investment as well. I mean, even ourselves with our housing investment trusts that we have through the AFL, and then even some of our own individual pension funds. We're having talks at those levels because we do those type of projects in other areas of the country. We've never done one of any significance in Rhode Island, and my hope as a labor leader in Rhode Island is that this could be that project where we would put a significant investment in some of the funds that we do. The HIT, we call it the Housing Investment Trust, that all the unions put in through the AFL-CIO, invests in these type of projects. So I got my fingers crossed that this would be the one in Rhode Island where we could plant a significant AFL Housing Trust flag on
All right,
it.
when we come back, one more question on housing, because it's the actual issue of the day. Stay with us. Quick answer. When you say workforce housing, what does that mean?
Workforce housing is
People who work for a living need houses.
Yeah, but they have a formula that they use. They take a SWOT in an area about the median income and what have you. And
here's
they do
the thing that's
percentage
crazy.
of
I mean, and as a parent of now a mid-late 20s
Right.
person who has a valuable career, job, she and all of her compatriots are all sitting there figuring, how in the heck do I get into the business of owning a roof over my head? It's unbelievable.
Right.
So you've got the people who are looking to downsize who can't because it's a catch-up, and the people who are trying to get into. Does labor have a strategic gut check and or answer as to whether this thing is going to calm itself down? I mean, you're not a real estate expert, but you're in the business of putting the structures up.
Right. The residential market, private residential, single-family homes is something that we do not get into. That's the Rhode Island home builders that is their I call it sector of the industry.
Right.
We do get into the large commercial, multi-residential projects, big condominium projects, big village
They
projects.
impact
Right.
the rental
Right,
world, which
right.
is you can't afford.
So what we try
Anything
and do
these
again
kids.
is when we pool our monies and investments to make significant investments in communities, housing is one of those investments, like I mentioned in the last segment. The fact that it perpetuates so that we can put money into those economies, create jobs at a standard of living, that hopefully when you say workforce, that the people that are actually building the housing can actually afford to live there. Not all of them, because you're always going to have some top-end units and, the penthouse or the top levels or double units, triple units, larger square footage. But what we mandate in these formulas is that there are percentages for people that are making the median income in a certain community to afford to live in that facility.
All right, I got 30 seconds here. You say you need 3,000 jobs.
At least.
You have 3,000 labor vacancies in the state.
Our guesstimates are by 2030, we'll need to add 3,000 tradesmen and women to the Rhode Island Building Trades. Electricians,
And
laborers,
your
carpenters, you
10-second
name it.
message on that is what?
Never been a better time to enter the construction industry.
Simple as that. Good to see you, man.
Good to
Thank
see you
you.
too.
Good
Thank
update.
you.
Be right back. No room for stigmas. The jobs are out there. Seize the moment, right? All right, we'll talk to you next week and on the radio weekdays 3 to 6 on WPRI. Bye.